Rabbit Witch. Tonight's story was sent by a listener who claims to be the only survivor of a missing passenger ship, a vessel that disappeared somewhere in the Pacific Ocean. They wrote, "I don't know if I was ever rescued, or if I just woke up somewhere the ocean left me." Let us begin and step into the story together. They said I was rescued after 362 days. A fishing vessel found me floating near an uncharted atoll, half awake, half rotted by the salt. When they lifted me onto their deck, I tried to stand, but my legs still believed in the motion of the ocean aurora. The sea was calm that morning, too calm. Even the gulls kept their distance. The Coast Guard wanted statements, medical records, a timeline. I couldn't give them any. What I remembered didn't follow days or nights. It was just one long stretch of gray water, a hum in the walls, and the sound of footsteps where no one was supposed to walk. They brought me here, to this white-walled ward overlooking another piece of the same ocean. From my bed I can see the horizon. Sometimes I think the line is moving closer. Sometimes I think it's waiting for me to look away. The doctors ask me to start from the beginning, so I do. We departed from San Pedro under clear skies. 207 souls on board. Passengers, crew, a handful of engineers. I was assigned to communications. A small glass room filled with soft green lights and the endless pulse of the radar. The first day passed without incident. Then, around mid-afternoon, the radar drew a small pulse just off our starboard bow. It shouldn't have been there. No nearby vessels, no land masses, no storms. Just a faint echo moving against the current. I logged it automatically. Unidentified drift 1 mile east. When I checked again, the dot was gone. But the afterimage lingered, like the screen refused to forget. I tapped the glass. The pulse came back once, just once, then vanished again. At dinner, I mentioned it. The captain said currents play tricks. The chief engineer laughed, said the Pacific eats its own reflections. Everyone laughed with him, I didn't. That night, a low fog slid across the deck, swallowing the running lights. From the bridge windows, the horizon dissolved. Even the stars disappeared, as if someone had turned them off one by one. The engines ran smooth, yet the whole ship felt like it was dragging something unseen. Down in the corridors, the air smelled of wet iron. The sound changed, too. The constant throb of machinery seemed slower, heavier, like a heartbeat buried in the metal. I tried to sleep in my cabin, but the floor vibrated under the mattress. Each time I closed my eyes, I felt it move in rhythm with my breathing. When I held my breath, it kept going. Morning came without sunlight, just a dull white haze that erased distance. The captain's voice over the intercom told us to remain calm. We'd adjusted course slightly. He didn't say why on the radar. That same echo returned, closer this time, right beneath our projected line of travel. It looked like another ship matching our speed, I reported it. He told me to ignore it. But every few hours it blinked back, a mirror moving under us. By the third day, the sea lost its color. Everything turned the same washed-out tone. Sky, water, even the faces of the crew. Voices grew quieter. People started whispering for no reason, as if afraid to wake something. One engineer said the lower decks were colder than before. Condensation formed on the pipes like sweat. I went down to check. The air was thick, metallic, almost breathing tools left overnight were rusting at the edges. When I tried to radio the bridge, the speaker only gave back static mixed with faint murmuring, syllables I recognized but couldn't place. Then, clear as my own thought, I heard my name. I froze. I replayed the tape. Nothing, just static again. Still, I swear I heard it. A soft whisper of my name dragged through water. That evening, the captain sealed the lower compartments. He said moisture had corroded the lines, that we were losing electrical balance. No one questioned him aloud, but I saw their eyes. We all knew something down there wasn't mechanical. The fog returned thicker than before, wrapping the ship in a pale shell. The navigation lights flickered through it like lanterns under ice. When I leaned over the rail, the reflection of the ship shimmered. Not exactly a reflection. The angles were wrong. It felt like looking down at another vessel moving beneath us, perfectly synchronized but delayed by a heartbeat. I kept watching. Then, in one instant, our reflection blinked before we did. The wave pattern below reversed, flowing backward toward the stern. I stepped back, nearly fell. The water was absolutely still, yet the reflection rippled on its own. Someone behind me asked what I was looking at. I turned. No one was there. Only the fog curling inward through the open hatch. Later, the captain ordered all reflective surfaces on the bridge covered. He said glare was confusing the instruments. We draped black cloth over the radar glass, the navigation charts, even the windows. When I asked how we were supposed to steer, he didn't answer. He just stared at the compass like it was lying to him. The days blurred. Meals stopped coming at regular hours. We ate when someone remembered to ring the bell. Half the passengers stayed in their cabins. Others wandered the hallways, counting doors as if to make sure the ship hadn't changed the length. I kept my journal, though the ink bled from the humidity. Each entry shorter than the last, because the handwriting didn't always look like mine. Once, I woke to find a line written while I slept. Don't look down. I tore that page out, but later found the same words pressed into the paper beneath. By the end of that week, if it was still a week, we lost one of the deckhands. He went below to check the bilge pumps and never came back. When they opened the hatch, the air that rose from below was colder than outside wind. It smelled faintly sweet, like decaying fruit. The captain ordered the hatch welded shut. We all heard it still echoing, that hollow clang of metal sealing something inside. After that, people stopped talking about rescue or radio contact. The only sound was the ocean tapping the hull, soft and rhythmic, like fingers on glass. Sometimes I counted them. Sometimes they answered back. One night I tried to send a general distress call. Every frequency I turned to was occupied by the same tone, a flat, human hum. Low and constant, I thought the transmitter was feeding back, but when I unplugged the cables, the sound continued. It wasn't coming from the equipment. It was coming from the walls, I told the captain again. He said there was nothing there, that panic spreads faster than disease. But he wouldn't look me in the eye. When he walked away, his reflection in the porthole lingered half a second longer than his body. I started avoiding mirrors after that. The fog thickened until it became part of the ship, clinging to railings, seeping into clothes. At night, even breathing felt heavy. Like inhaling water, people coughed salt. The ocean stopped making waves. That was when I realized the engine vibration had disappeared. Yet the ship still moved. I could feel it sliding forward through something thicker than water. We weren't drifting. We were being carried. They tell me that's where my memory breaks. That the next thing I should recall is rescue. But I remember more. I remember waking up in my cabin, the porthole wide open, and outside there was no sky, only another ship exactly like ours, upside down, its lights burning deep beneath the surface. For a long moment, we were parallel, mirror to mirror. Then the reflection blinked first. After that, nothing was the same. When I close my eyes now, I still hear the hum. It isn't loud, but it fills everything. Sometimes I think it's the ocean. Sometimes I think it's waiting for me to remember what I saw when the fog finally opened. That's all I can tell you, for now. Because every night, when the ward lights go out, I hear the same sound again, faint but close, rising through the pipes, whispering through the vents. The low, patient breath of something still moving beneath the Pacific. That's all I can tell you, for now. Because every night, when the ward lights go out, I hear the same sound again, faint but close, rising through the pipes, whispering through the vents. The low, patient breath of something still moving beneath the Pacific. The doctors say it's water pressure in the hospital walls, but they don't understand the rhythm. It isn't mechanical. It waits between each inhale, like a thought deciding whether to continue. I didn't notice the rhythm back then, not until we started losing people. The noise began as a vibration under the floorboards, a pulse that didn't belong to any engine I knew. The engineers swore all systems were balanced. Still, the deck plates trembled. Every night the same beat, steady and human. We told ourselves it was nothing. That denial kept us breathing. But when I think back now, it began the moment we sealed the lower decks. The order came after Rowe disappeared. He'd gone down to the coolant corridor, left his flashlight on the steps. When we found it, the bulb was still warm. The lens cracked from inside, no sign of him. Only the sound of dripping water, slow even, echoing up through the grates. The captain called it an accident. He said we'd wait for daylight to search. No one moved after that. It wasn't fear of what we'd find. It was the way the ship listened. Every step, every whisper, bounced back too quickly, like the steel had learned to mimic us. I took my post in the communications room. The static was thicker than usual, more textured, almost wet. When I pressed my ear to the receiver, it hissed like foam dissolving on shore. Then, underneath, a voice, dull, far away, counting. Numbers slow, deliberate. When I replayed the tape, nothing, blank air. Days passed. At least we called them days. The light above the fog never changed. No sunrise, no sunset, just a flat white glare that erased shadows. We marked time by meals, but even the food lost its taste. Salt spread across everything, bread, plates, metal, skin. The next to vanish was the cook. He'd been cleaning the galley, radio humming beside him. Someone heard the music cut off mid-song, replaced by that same low hum that haunted the hull. When we reached the kitchen, his apron was still hanging by the stove. The pot boiled over. Water, not soup. The smell of iron. The captain ordered the ship divided, crew forward, passengers aft. No one protested. We just followed the new borders, pretending they meant safety. He kept the hatch to the lower decks locked, carrying the key in his breast pocket like a talisman. At night, I saw him stand there, listening. Sometimes he whispered to the door before turning away. The noise beneath us grew restless. It changed pitch with the tide, higher during stillness. Lower when the wind picked up. I began logging the intervals. Every 6 hours, the sound pulsed 3 times, stopped, then repeated. A pattern, a signal. When I showed the chart to the captain, he tore it in half and told me to forget it. He said the ocean doesn't speak. But I'd heard it trying. We tried to send a distress call on a closed band. The receiver caught interference. A faint tapping, Morse-like but incomplete. Long, short pause. I wrote it down. It spelled nothing. Yet when I flipped the notebook upside down, the marks formed the word mine. I told myself it was coincidence. I stopped writing after that. The smell of the ship changed. Not decay, but something colder, cleaner, as if the air had been strained through metal breathing hurt. Each inhale scraped the back of my throat, leaving a taste like blood. The fog crept inside, gathering in corners, refusing to move. Our voices made no echo anymore. Sound just disappeared. One evening, while checking the forward storeroom, I found condensation forming on the ceiling. It gathered in small beads, glimmering in the lamplight, then slid upward, vanishing into the metal. I touched it, cold, almost alive. My hand came back damp with something thicker than water. When I wiped it on my sleeve, the stain shimmered faintly, reflecting light that wasn't there. I didn't tell anyone. There was nothing to explain. Later that night, I heard footsteps pacing above my cabin. Slow, deliberate. I went out, but the corridor was empty. Still, the sound continued, matching my heartbeat until I stopped counting. The next morning, the first officer said we'd turn back, but the compass spun freely, unable to settle. The sea looked the same in every direction. A white skin stretched over something vast. When I asked how we'd find home, he said, "We're already there." Then he laughed. Too long, like the words weren't his. By then, the silence had become a presence. When I dropped a wrench, no clang followed. When someone spoke, the sound reached the ear but not the mind. It was like the air refused to carry weight. At times I wondered if we'd already sunk, if what we called silence was the ocean itself pressing against the hull. I kept the radio running day and night, hoping for any human noise. Instead, the hum returned, stronger now, vibrating through my teeth. Then came a whisper, clear as breath. "Below deck." I turned every dial. The voice stayed, moving with me, until it sounded as if it were behind my ear. I slammed the switch off. The room didn't get quieter. The hum was still there, in the metal, in the floor, in me. When I couldn't stand it anymore, I went to the sealed hatch. The padlock was slick with moisture, like sweat. I pressed my ear to the door. Silence. Then, faintly, a single knock. Not echo. Answer. I stumbled back. The sound came again, gentle, patient. 3 knocks, a pause, then nothing. The engineer beside me whispered, "Maybe he's still down there." But we both knew Roe was gone. Still, we waited, counting seconds until we lost count. The air thickened. The smell of iron grew sharp enough to sting. When we opened our eyes, the corridor lights were dimming one by one. We didn't open the hatch, we just left. We told no one what we'd heard. After that night, the floor under that section of the ship began to sweat. Water seeped up through the bolts, tiny black beads forming words that vanished before we could read them. People stopped sleeping. They sat in corridors, whispering to themselves. The ship's hum had taken the shape of a heartbeat, and we were sinking to it. I started hearing my name again, sometimes from the vents, sometimes from nowhere at all. "Once," I answered. The voice replied, "Almost below." That was when I stopped speaking. I don't remember the day the captain disappeared. Only that one morning his door was open and his uniform was folded neatly on the bed. Wet as if it had just been pulled from the sea, the key to the hatch was gone. From that moment, the ship no longer made sense. Corridors doubled back on themselves. Aft led to bow, bow led to nowhere. The hum rose and fell like breathing in a dream. We kept moving through the same hallway, convinced it was a different one each time. Someone started marking the walls with chalk. By the 3rd mark, the chalk melted into the paint. I think that's when the ocean finally came inside. The air turned cold and sweet, the way deep water smells before a storm. The lights flickered slower, not faster. It felt like the ship was sinking upward. That's the only way I can describe it. We weren't going down. The world around us was. The last thing I wrote in my hidden log was one sentence. "The silence is learning to speak." After that, my pen refused to work. The ink clotted, hardened, turned the color of dried blood. I tore the page out. But when I turned back, the same words had appeared again on the next sheet. When I close my eyes now, here in this hospital bed, I can still smell that air. Cold, metallic, endless. Sometimes, if the pipes start humming at night, I catch myself counting again, waiting for the knock. They said the sound would fade with time. It didn't. It changed pitch, growing thinner, sharper, as if it had learned the shape of the room. At first, I thought it was memory, the echo of steel plates still trembling in my head. But last night, when the nurse opened the window, the hum followed the wind inward. It was the same frequency that lived beneath the Aurora's deck. I know it. I used to measure it every night until I stopped pretending it was an engine. Back then, after the captain disappeared, command shifted to the first officer. He was young, logical, proud of his skepticism. He told us the crew's exhaustion had bred a shared hallucination. He used that word, hallucination, as if naming the fear could drown it. But he avoided the lower deck. We all did. The fog thinned that morning for the first time in weeks. I saw a clear horizon, flat, silver, endless. The compass needle trembled but didn't point anywhere. The first officer ordered the engines restarted. They groaned like an animal forced awake. Every gauge returned false readings. Speed, 0. Depth, unknown. Course, Pacific, unmarked. Someone laughed, a thin, nervous sound. It broke the silence, and the sea answered. A single wave struck the hull, deliberate as a heartbeat. Then nothing. We drifted until dusk. When the sun should have set, the light stayed white. Shadows refused to form. It was then that we noticed the water glowing faintly. Like breath beneath glass, I leaned over the rail. Beneath us, another reflection waited. Not inverted this time, just delayed. When we moved, it followed. A few seconds late, as if the sea were remembering us after we'd already passed. That was when one of the crew whispered a new name. Pacific Dread. He said it like a confession. The phrase spread quietly through the corridors. No one laughed. It fit too well. Nights blurred together. The fog climbed back aboard, clinging to our skin until we tasted salt in every breath. The hum had turned into a pulse now. Slower than a heartbeat, deeper than the ocean floor. Sometimes, when the air ducts rattled, I could hear words in it, half-formed, vowels stretched thin. The syllables made no language I knew, but they carried intent. Listening felt like standing in front of a locked door. Knowing something on the other side was breathing with you, I began keeping records again. Lines, frequencies, intervals. The pattern was constant. 3 long pulses, 1 short, pause, repeat. Not random A message. When I reversed the tape, it formed a single sentence. Fear of the Pacific. I told myself it was a trick of resonance, the same way wind plays flutes through broken masts, but then the printer in the communications room activated by itself. Paper rolled out slowly, each sheet wet to the touch. Every line of text identical, fear of the Pacific 50 pages. All blank beneath the phrase, like the rest of the words had drowned before reaching ink. I burned them in the galley stove. The smoke was colorless, the smell, salt and iron. Sleep left us one by one. Men sat in hallways staring at their boots, waiting for a sound that would tell them which direction was real. The ship no longer obeyed balance. Some rooms leaned uphill while others slanted into nothing. Water condensed on ceilings and dripped upward again. The walls exhaled steam without heat. I stopped writing and began listening. Through the hum, faint knocks returned. 3, pause, 3. The same pattern Rowe had tapped before he vanished. It came from every bulkhead now, moving slowly forward as if tracing us from below. That night, the fog outside turned darker than the sky itself. No moon, no reflection, only a hollow glow rising from beneath the ship. Someone shouted that another vessel was surfacing ahead. We rushed to the deck. Out there, the sea bulged upward, smooth and round like a dome of glass. Within it, lights flickered. Rows of windows, identical to our own. An entire ship inverted, pressing upward from the deep. Its hull shimmered with movement, pale figures drifting behind the portholes like drowned shadows trying to surface. For a moment, our deck lights matched theirs. 2 vessels aligned, mirror to mirror. The hum spiked, vibrating through bone and blood. Then the reflection blinked. Once, every bulb aboard us dimmed. The wave of darkness rolled stern to bow, slow as breathing. When light returned, the sea was flat again, but the rails were wet, dripping with water that smelled like rusted memory. We should have turned back, but there was no direction left. The ocean had become a circle of identical horizons. The first officer ordered everyone below to check the ballast. I stayed topside, unable to move. The stars were gone. Only the ship existed, us, the hum, and the empty air. Hours later, the officer didn't return. The hatch he'd entered began to rattle, slow at first, then faster. No one dared open it. The sound stopped suddenly, leaving only silence so heavy it rang in our ears. When we finally unlatched the door, the compartment was dry, untouched. No sign of him, just a wet footprint facing the wrong way. The fog brightened without warning, white light flooding every deck. It wasn't sunlight, it had no warmth. Everything glowed evenly, shadows erased, depth gone. In that blinding stillness, I heard the hum rise one last time, steady, full, alive. It wasn't outside anymore. It was inside the hull, inside us. Our hearts followed it, slowing, matching the rhythm. Then, without transition, the sound stopped. No wind, no engine, no ocean. The world held its breath. For the first time since leaving port, I felt weightless. The instruments showed 0 in every column, position, none, depth, none, speed, none. The Pacific had erased us from itself. Not sunk, forgotten. I don't remember what happened after that, only the stillness. When I opened my eyes again, I was in this bed. White walls, clean sheets. The hum whispering through the pipes like a memory rehearsing itself. Sometimes I wonder if the Aurora ever stopped moving. If maybe this ward is just another deck, drifting under a different name. The doctors call it trauma. They say what I survived was a disappearance at sea, but they weren't there. They never heard the ocean breathe. Because I know now what we called the Pacific wasn't water. It was thought. It was waiting. When the hum stopped, it wasn't silence that followed. It was something heavier, a thickness in the air that pressed against the lungs. We thought the engines had finally died, but the needles still trembled, suspended between numbers that no longer meant anything. Outside the portholes, the world had turned white. Not bright, just empty. I tried to speak, but the air swallowed the words before they reached my tongue. Others moved in slow confusion, gestures half-formed, like people underwater who had forgotten how to rise. When we dropped a wrench, it didn't fall. It drifted, turning once before touching the floor without sound. Something in the balance of the ship had changed. The weight of the ocean felt reversed. We were floating, yes, but not upward. It was as if gravity had decided to remember something else first. The first officer was still gone. No command now, no hierarchy, just bodies pacing corridors that led nowhere. Someone tried the radio again. Static returned, thick and layered. And through it came a voice. Not a human voice. It sounded like the ship breathing through rusted lungs. "Do you hear that?" a woman whispered. Her mouth moved, but the sound came from the floor, rising like steam. I didn't answer. There was no need. We all heard the same thing. The sound didn't travel anymore. It existed in every direction at once, as if the hull had become its throat. It wasn't language, but it was speaking. We began to see condensation again. Only now it formed on our skin instead of metal. Tiny droplets glimmered under the weak emergency lights, each one trembling with the same rhythm. When I wiped them away, they came back darker, leaving faint rings like printed words I couldn't read. One man tried to pray. He knelt near the bulkhead, muttering verses that fell apart mid-sentence. When he opened his eyes, he said he'd heard an echo that repeated everything after he said it, not before. He stopped praying after that. Days, if they were still days, began to fold into one another. We started using the hum as a clock. 3 pulses meant shift change. 1 long pause meant sleep. But none of us were sleeping. I returned to the communications room to check the recorder. The reels had unwound themselves across the floor, the tape tangled like intestines. On the last few inches, something had etched itself into the magnetic strip. Not sound, but scratches shaped like letters. When I held them to the light, they spelled, "We are beneath." The letters pulsed faintly, glowing for a second, then fading as if breathing. I touched one. It was cold, and the cold stayed in my fingertip for hours. I told myself it was a trick of pressure, but the word beneath kept circling in my head, repeating with a hum until the two were indistinguishable. Later, I found the engineer sitting outside the sealed hatch. He had the captain's key in his lap. He didn't look at me. He just said, "It's calling from under the ballast." Before I could stop him, he unlocked the hatch and stepped inside. I followed. The air hit me like a wall, wet, metallic, filled with the smell of static. Condensation coated every surface, beads rising and falling at once. The machinery was silent. No movement, no vibration. Yet the deck beneath us throbbed faintly, as if something huge were breathing below the keel. The engineer knelt beside a vent, pressing his ear to it. For a moment, nothing. Then, from deep within the pipes, a whisper surfaced. My name, I heard it clear, stretched through miles of water. He heard it too. We stared at each other. Then the vent exhaled. The force knocked him backward. When I looked again, he was gone. Not dragged, not pulled, gone. The vent was dry. No mark of him remained, only a patch of frost in the shape of an open hand. I sealed the hatch myself, locked it twice, and threw the key down the stairwell. The sound of it falling never came back. After that, the hum changed, tone lower, almost kind, like the thing beneath us was satisfied. I stayed by the door all night, writing. Every word I put on paper began to drift, letters sliding apart as if the ink were still alive. By morning, each page was blank again. Whatever I wrote, the ship erased, not scratched out, absorbed. I tried carving words into the wall instead. The metal healed over while I was still holding the knife. It felt like cutting into something that wanted to be touched. The others started whispering about the waterline. They said it was climbing the walls inside the hull. When I checked, I saw nothing. But later, in the reflection of the corridor glass, I saw it. The floor below us slowly filling with a black shimmer that didn't ripple like liquid. It pulsed. It mirrored our movements, delayed by one heartbeat. When I leaned closer, my reflection opened its mouth. No sound, only the shape of the word listen. That was when I understood the hum wasn't a warning, it was an invitation. Some of us refused to stay aboard any longer. They built makeshift rafts, desperate for any surface that wasn't steel. At dawn, they lowered themselves into the white water. I watched from the rail. They didn't sink. They didn't float either. They just faded, as though the ocean had blinked and forgotten to bring them back. The ship continued without crew. It steered itself, no wind, no current. I stayed because movement felt safer than stillness. When the fog thinned again, I saw shapes below the surface. Not wreckage, not shadows. Bodies, hundreds of them, suspended in the pale light. Their eyes open, watching upward. Their faces were familiar. Ours. The reflection of the aurora rippled once more, then stabilized, showing a full crew moving perfectly in sync, but reversed, as if the sea had memorized us. When I waved, they waved back. A second later. That's when the noise began again, louder than before, echoing through my chest, the same rhythm, the same patience. Only now I knew what it meant. It wasn't fear of the Pacific. It was the Pacific's fear of us. I think the ocean had been trying to remember what it used to be before we crossed it, before we built engines to divide its silence. Now it was taking its language back. The last log I ever wrote ended halfway through a sentence. I didn't stop writing. The pen just hovered there, ink trembling, as if the page itself were breathing, every sound aboard the ship folded into one long, continuous note. It wasn't loud, it was absolute. And in that note, beneath everything, a whisper. You are beneath now. When I woke again, there was no ship, no sea. Only this bed, this room, this hum returning through the pipes. Sometimes I still hear footsteps pacing under the floor, counting, Sometimes I answer. The echo always answers back. When the fog finally lifted, there was no horizon left to see. Only a flat white sky pressed against an equally white sea. Like two sheets of glass with nothing between them, I thought I was alone. Then the hum began again. Softer, closer, moving through my ribs, as if something inside me had learned how to breathe without air. Now I'm here. A hospital room overlooking a quiet stretch of water. They say I've been back for months, that my recovery is a miracle. I nod when they say that, but when I close my eyes, the world still rocks slightly, and I can feel the walls breathing in the same slow rhythm as the sea. The monitors hum 3 long beats, 1 short pause. I know that pattern. It was the same pulse that echoed through the ship's hull before we vanished. The doctors speak softly. Their voices never quite match their mouths. They say my body is healing. They say the ocean aurora was never found. They say I'm safe. But sometimes, when the room goes quiet, I can hear the same sound rising through the pipes, low and patient, like the ocean pressing itself against the walls. Last week they brought me a small notebook. They said it might help to write things down. I tried, but the ink kept spreading, lines blurring into waves until the words were unreadable. Once, I saw my own name written again and again across the page, each version smaller, fainter, as if sinking deeper with every repetition. I asked for a mirror. They said there weren't any. Still, I found one, a piece of metal on the tray near my bed. When I looked, my reflection was there, but it moved slower than I did. When I blinked, it didn't. And when I turned away, it kept watching. A man came to see me 2 days ago. He said he was from Maritime Recovery. He wore a dark uniform, salt still crusted on the fabric. When I asked his name, he smiled and said, "Roe, the engineer." But Roe was gone. I saw him disappear below deck myself. He placed an old recorder on the table, the same model we used on the Aurora, edges corroded with rust. He pressed play. The tape hissed, and then my voice came through. "This is the final transmission of the passenger vessel Ocean Aurora. We are beneath." When I looked up, the man was gone. Only the faint smell of iron remained. The recorder was still running, the tape spinning though no sound played. Now the nurses move quietly, their shoes leaving no sound. When I speak to them, they smile without blinking. Sometimes their reflections in the glass stand still while their bodies move. I try to tell myself it's the medication, that the sea is hundreds of miles away, that the hum is only electricity running through the walls. But every night, just before I fall asleep, I hear the same whisper rise from somewhere below the floor. A calm, steady voice repeating words I once said. "You are beneath now." I open my eyes, and the ceiling drips condensation, not salt water. Still, I smell rust. The sheets are damp from my own sweat, and the heart monitor hums in that same rhythm. 3 long beats, 1 short. The doctors will come soon. They'll check the machines, smile, and tell me it's normal. But when they turn away, their shadows stay by the bed a moment too long. I think the Pacific doesn't forget. It keeps what it takes, not the bodies, but the moments that stopped with them. It stores them somewhere below the noise, holds them until they start to sound like memory, then releases them again, piece by piece, wearing our voices. Beneath this hospital, the Ocean Aurora is still there. Not moving, just waiting. Everything it took is still inside. When I breathe, the walls answer. The sound is closer every time. If anyone finds this recording later, remember this. We didn't come back. We were never rescued. We only went deeper. Did you enjoy the story? This has been Fear of the Pacific. I'm the White Rabbit Witch. If you like tonight's tale, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, and share your thoughts below.